Welcome to the Housing Forum Futures Network podcast series, Breaking Barriers, Collaborative Solutions to Housing Delivery. I'm Charlie Ash, Sector Lead for Housing Associations at NHBC, and this episode will be focused around the shortfall in funding for affordable and social housing. So what better guest to be joined by than the person who heads up the most important funding stream for affordable housing in England, Shahi Islam. Over to you to introduce yourself.
Hi, Charlie. Thank you for having me and a privilege to be here. So I'm the Director of Affordable Housing at Homes England, leading the delivery of the Affordable Homes Programme for the government. So currently leading a £9 billion programme for the agency across England, everywhere outside London.
Great. Good to see you, Shahi. So to kick things off, I want to acknowledge that although financial constraints, particularly a shortfall in funding for affordable and social housing, came out as one of the top barriers in our research, some of the interviews and surveys would have been conducted ahead of the spending review announcements. Shahi, can you give us an overview of what came out of the review for affordable housing delivery?
Yes, spending review was a really positive outcome for the social housing sector. First things first, the size of the allocation we received, £39 billion for the Affordable Homes Programme, now called the Social and Affordable Homes Programme. A great outcome, so almost quadrupled the budget that we had as an agency. Our share of that budget is 27 billion and the GLA receives the rest. So as you can see, currently managing a 9 billion programme versus a 27 billion programme, so a large increase in that. The funding pot is one piece, the most important piece fundamentally, but we did get more certainty around what we expect to see from the new programme once it becomes operational from April 2026. The first, which government have been talking about for a long time, and even the predecessor government, was about the focus on social rent as a tenure. So you've seen since 2017-18, when social rent came back into the programme as a tenure of choice, and then since 2022-23, again, focus on that tenure. So that's a key priority for the programme, which is expecting partners to do more social rent across the country as well. The other thing that came along with the programme was certainty around what government will intend to do with the rent convergence policy as well. So we're hoping there was a consultation released, and we're hoping that more will follow at autumn budget later on in November, again giving the sector certainty around how they can plan for their delivery for social and affordable housing. Alongside that, a few other consultations in play at the moment around decent homes, around quality, etc., leaseholder reform, all which will impact in some way or another, indirectly or directly, into the way partners engage with the programme. Likewise, on the policy front, some important amendments to access to social housing as well. So change the rules for victims of domestic violence and young care leavers as well, giving them priority access to social housing anywhere in the country.
So we all wait with suspense for the prospectus in autumn. What can you tell us about the new programme?
This time round, government have given us more information around the programme before it being kind of formally launched. Social rent expectations being at least 60% of the tenure. So that gives you an indication of the level of social rent we want to see in a programme. A bigger focus on local and regional priorities. So with the devolution agenda and us working with those emerging strategic mayoral authorities, what you'll see potentially through prospectus and the way that we engage with partners is more locally driven engagement.
And like you mentioned, it's not only the new programme, 2 top-ups were secured to provide bridge funding in the interim. As part of that, Homes England's announced the pilot with City of Wolverhampton Council. Can you tell us more about that?
Our current procurement routes to access the programme are two main routes. So we have something called continuous market engagement, which gives our partners the opportunity to come in and access grant funding on a scheme-by-scheme basis. Another one is our strategic partnership framework, which looks to provide larger awards of allocations to our partners that can demonstrate kind of pace and scale in terms of their delivery ambition. CME, or continuous market engagement, again, scheme by scheme, but what we saw and learned from our partners was that as a drive to, or a want to actually have more certainty over the grant funding on their bids, what some of our partners experienced, particularly, I guess, almost 12 months to 18 months ago was uncertainty around future funding, where they came in for one bid, and then actually when they were ready to come for their second bid, the funding uncertainty was too much, and actually they had to wait for further funding to come through to get that security. The idea of a portfolio deal is that we take into account their kind of overall ambition, looking at potentially a portfolio of schemes across their remit. So with the Wolverhampton City Council deal, it was very much they had a pipeline of schemes that were ready to be funded, but all at different stages in terms of when they will be delivered. And our approach was to approve a bid on the basis of kind of indicative allocation almost, and giving them certainty of grant funding for all those schemes. I think the financial security and stability was the key one that they were looking for, because I'm just making these numbers up, but you could receive, for example, £500,000 for one scheme, but wait another 2 years for the next bit of funding. But actually us giving them certainty over 5 schemes, for example, that they can plan financially for building their pipeline.
So I know that you acknowledge that the market landscape is difficult, what with higher construction costs, higher land costs and higher compliance costs. Do grant rates reflect this?
Yes, they do. I think generally there's been an acceptance that the cost landscape has changed over the last 15 years. The last time we saw social rent being delivered at pace was pre-2010. Over the last 15 years, we have seen it come back into the market, and more so in the recent past. I'd probably refer back to the kind of business case reset that we undertook late 2022-23, following the budget of autumn 2022, where it caused difficulties to the sector in terms of the delivery certainty, and actually very quickly working with government and the sector, we were able to kind of review the grant rates, and actually some of those grant rates changed more upwards in terms of being able to deliver social rent and give stability to their delivery. I think what's important to note is that government have listened to the sector. Likewise, the intelligence that we collect from partners around social rent and the costs that we're seeing has all been fed into the way that we're supporting government design the business case for the new AHP. So what we're still expecting to see, though, is partners still driving value for money. So whilst there is acceptance that costs have increased, that the team and I will still be pressing for value for money in terms of how we assess those bids that come through.
Understood. And there's a lot of discussion around housing grant shortfall. So what would be your suggested solutions for making up that shortfall?
So in terms of the shortfall for grant, I'd say that's a lot in the remit of those partners engaging with us. I won't be in a position to give financial advice to those partners. I'm sure they have financial officers that are much more competent than I am in that area. But it's making sure that they understand all the avenues of funding that they can access. And this is where the agency also has a bigger role to play in terms of the support beyond the grant programme. You would have heard that the agency is establishing a national housing bank as well. Government have committed £16 billion worth of loan funding to that bank. On top of that, the government have also committed to 2.5 billion low interest loans funding to support the social and affordable housing programme as well, another outcome from spending review earlier in the year. So I think it's taking a more holistic approach to that kind of what I would say the capital cost stack in terms of what you use to kind of the assumptions you use to make a bid to us, drawing upon both private finance and your own reserves as well. And on that private finance, probably another piece, maybe a separate discussion around how we motivate and incentivise more public-private partnerships to draw in other types of institutional investment.
And what about funding reform?
So funding reform is quite broad in terms of a topic. I'd say in terms of the grant framework, probably limited opportunity to change that. It's a tried and tested model. The Affordable Homes Programme has existed in some way or another since the kind of 1960s. And in more recent years, the kind of last 4 or 5 programmes have been very much a quite simple model in essence, in terms of we give a grant to fill that viability gap and service the building of homes that the market otherwise can't deliver. So I think in terms of the grant framework, that will pretty much stay the same. Where there's probably a need for funding reform or an opportunity to look at funding reform is as I said, around the way that the public finance interfaces with the private market as well, in terms of why recently we're seeing an increase in private institutional capital into the affordable housing space, but why also are they still facing certain barriers around being able to make that move from a discussion into an investment. I think the agency is doing a lot of positive work around that space. Some of the deals that we've kind of entered into over the last kind of 18 months to 2 years have kind of indicated the kind of way the agency is moving in terms of trying to attract that investment. So in terms of reform, it's probably more about understanding the opportunities that exist and the types of partnerships that you could kind of draw into, and a role for the agency and my team to maybe help steward and broker some of those partnerships, because I think we all get drawn into day-to-day type of work. Our outcome is very much focused on immediate need, and sometimes there isn't enough time to do that bigger picture thinking.
So I thought it could be interesting to do a little bit of myth busting. Homes England get asked a lot about transparency on grant rates. Is this something you share?
No, we don't share grant rates. We never have shared grant rates. But I do see where the sector are coming from, nervousness around the pressure on them to deliver quite an ambitious affordable homes programme and a focus on social rent. What I would say is that, as we always say with every programme and the way that we continuously engage with this sector, is that you come and talk to us about your proposals, come and talk to us about the grant needs that you have that underpin your bid, and we'll work with you to ensure that we can help you deliver those schemes. What I would also say is that there's learning and evidence from the last 10 years of delivery. Each of our partners will have seen grant rates incrementally increase, taking into account the kind of economic landscape and cost landscape that they're working to. So there is evidence to draw upon that government and the agency have listened and understand that it will cost more to deliver social rent homes.
Something else which is often talked about is whether for-profit registered providers can and do access the Affordable Homes Programme. So can you bust that myth for us?
Yes. So again, in short, for-profit partners can access grant and enter our programme. And we have had, I say, over the last 10 years, quite a lot of high level of success in terms of those partners that have engaged with us through the Affordable Homes Programme. And we've seen an evolution of how engagement with that programme as well. So, for example, when we first launched the Strategic Partnership Framework back in 2018, it was only open to not-for-profit traditional HAs, but learning from that meant that we could open it up to for-profit HAs in 2021 for the 21-26 programme, and two of our largest partners are for-profit partners in that space. And even through our continuous market engagement, we're seeing a lot of interest from the for-profit sector, made large number of allocations to those for-profits. So what I would say to all our partners is that there is enough grant out there to make sure we can allocate across the whole country. But we also need diversity of partners as well. From a programme management perspective, I'm always thinking about concentration risk and delivery risk when it comes to how I manage delivery across the country. And we need diversity of partners and numbers of partners to make sure that if one partner can't do it, another partner can step in as well.
And while we've got you on the mic, are there any other myths about the programme or funding in general that you'd like to bust?
So other myths are around our capital funding guidance. I guess some of it can be viewed by some of the sector as being too restrictive. I think what I would say is that you need those strict funding conditions, mainly because of it's public funding that we're allocating. We are using taxpayers' money to build affordable housing. And so there are rules and regulations around how we deploy that grant funding. Again, they could be seen as quite onerous, but my view is that they're needed to make sure that we spend money wisely. Likewise, the grant agreement as well, in terms of how we monitor and manage your programme as well. Comments around the need to be so controlling over how we programme manage delivery and allocations, but again, coming back to the point that we're trying to make sure that partners deliver the homes that the people need in this country. So that's a point there to kind of note.
Thank you, that's been useful. And something that we've talked about before is around those positive relationships. You touched on earlier joint ventures and partnerships. Do you see these as a solution for delivery?
Absolutely, yes. I think the traditional model that we have, where RPs, HAs, local authorities engage on a bilateral basis with us to access grant funding, yes, is a fundamental part of how we're going to deliver the programme. But we know that if in order to meet government's ambitious housing targets, we do need to be more diverse in how we support other types of partnerships and deals. And this is where my team and the agency's team have a really big role to support that and steward those conversations. Mainly because I think there's still, coming back to your point around myth busting, I think there's still a lot of, from a lot of partners and the sector, understanding how the Affordable Homes Programme works, what our grant conditions are, particularly for some of the newer entrants trying to navigate that space where their group structure entity isn't based around kind of a not-for-profit structure. They need to understand the rules of engagement. They need to understand the conditions of grant. They need to understand the rules of grant recovery, which is when do you pay back that grant, etc. And there's a role for the agency to make sure all stakeholders understand that role piece as well. But also connecting partners to different partners in terms of the geographic and local need piece as well. A partnership may work in one part of the country really, really well because of the kind of historic footprint of that partner and operational delivery in that area, but then also because of the pre-existing relationships that might have existed. Whereas in other parts of the country, because of funding cuts and because of the way local authorities operate, they may need more support to kind of help bridge the gap between identifying partners and maintaining those relationships.
A key takeaway for me has been the really positive announcements in relation to the affordable housing grant funding in the last year. And what is clear is that the government are listening. We await the detail of the prospectus, but as Shahi has outlined, it is anticipated that the programme will not be too dissimilar from previous iterations. There has been a clear call to action to engage with the agency around your funding requirements. I am Charlie Ash, and this has been the Funding Podcast, where we've been building on positive conversations around delivering affordable housing, the recent government targets, and what funding is out there for you to access. Thank you, Shahi.
Thank you.